Daddy, her baby is freezing!
Here, take this. We'll help you both.
The baby's cry was so weak it almost disappeared beneath the sound of the wind. Most people would never have heard it. Most people were too busy, too late, too cold, too focused on getting somewhere warm, but a 5-year-old girl heard it. And that single moment, one child stopping in the snow would quietly change lives that morning, long before the city realized anything extraordinary had happened. The snow began falling before dawn, thick and steady, blanketing Manhattan in a deceptive calm. Streetlights glowed softly through the white haze, casting long shadows across sidewalks that were already slick with ice. Winter in the city was never kind, but this morning felt especially cruel, sharp, biting, and unforgiving. Ethan Cole stepped out of his black SUV and immediately felt the cold slice through his wool coat. He paused, exhaling slowly, watching his breath cloud the air. For a brief second, he allowed himself to just stand there, grounded in the moment. He had learned to do that after life taught him how quickly things could shatter without warning. "Daddy!" A bright voice called from behind him. Ethan turned, and the weight of the world lifted just a little. Lily hopped down from the SUV with the careful determination of a child wearing boots a size too big. She was bundled in a pink puffer jacket, thick mittens dangling from strings, and a knitted hat pulled low over her ears. Brown curls escaped in wild defiance, framing her flushed cheeks. "It's snowing more," she announced, eyes wide with excitement, as if the city had personally arranged the weather just for her. Ethan smiled. "You noticed that, huh?" She nodded vigorously. "It's the good snow. The kind that sticks," Ethan chuckled, reaching for her mittened hand. "Well then, we better hurry before it turns into the slippery kind." Mornings like this were sacred to him. Every weekday, without exception, Ethan dropped Lily off at school himself before heading to the towering glass building downtown that bore his company's name, Cole Innovations. Reporters liked to call him the youngest CEO to disrupt the tech sector in a decade. But Lily just called him Daddy. That title mattered infinitely more. Since his wife, Hannah, died 4 years earlier, Ethan had built his life around predictability. Structure kept the grief from swallowing him whole. Lily kept him breathing. Their routine was simple. Park near the cafe on the corner. Get hot chocolate for Lily, black coffee for him, then walk the remaining blocks together before parting ways for the day. As they started across the sidewalk, Lily skipped beside him, boots crunching against the snow. "Daddy," she said casually, "can we make a snowman later?" Ethan glanced at his watch. He had a board meeting, 2 investor calls, and a product launch review stacked back to back. Still, he smiled. "We'll see," he said gently. "If the snow behaves," she giggled, satisfied with the answer. They were halfway to the cafe when Lily stopped so suddenly that Ethan nearly walked into her. "Sweetheart?" he asked, surprised. She didn't respond. Her small hand tightened around his, grip unusually firm. Ethan followed her line of sight, expecting maybe a dog or something that had caught her attention. Instead, he saw the alcove. It was a narrow space between 2 buildings, dark, partially shielded from the wind, but still painfully exposed. At first glance, it looked empty, just another shadowed corner people passed without noticing. Then he saw movement. A woman sat on the ground, her back pressed against the brick wall. She wore layers that had long ago lost their warmth, and a thin, frayed blanket was wrapped around her shoulders. Her face was pale, lips cracked, eyes sunken with exhaustion. In her arms was a baby. The child was so small, so unnaturally still, that Ethan's heart lurched. The baby let out a faint cry, a fragile sound that trembled in the frozen air before being swallowed by the wind. Lily inhaled sharply. "Daddy," she whispered. Ethan looked down at her. Her eyes were fixed on the baby, wide and wet. "Daddy," she said again, her voice breaking. "Her baby is freezing." The words hit him harder than any boardroom confrontation ever had. He followed her gaze back to the woman, really looking this time not as a passerby, not as someone with somewhere important to be, but as a father. The baby's tiny hands were red and stiff. The woman rocked gently, murmuring something Ethan couldn't hear. Her body curved protectively around the child as if she could shield her with sheer willpower. People walked past. Some glanced briefly. Most didn't look at all. Ethan felt a familiar instinct rise in him, the one that told him to move on, to hand this problem off to someone else, to trust that systems existed to handle things like this. Then Lily tugged his hand. "Daddy," she said urgently, "she's so cold." Ethan swallowed. He knelt down in front of Lily, meeting her eyes. "Okay," he said softly. "Let's go talk to her." Lily nodded instantly, relief flooding her face. As they approached, the woman stiffened. Her arms tightened around the baby, eyes darting warily. "I'm not asking for money," she said quickly, voice hoarse and defensive. "I swear. There was no room at the shelter." Ethan held up a hand in a calming gesture. "It's okay," he said gently. "We're not here to judge?" The woman studied him, skepticism etched deep into her expression. Her gaze flicked to Lily, lingering there. Lily stepped forward before Ethan could stop her. "She's shaking," Lily said softly, pointing at the baby. "Babies aren't supposed to shake." The woman's throat bobbed as she swallowed. "Her name's Ava." Ethan crouched lower, keeping his voice calm. "How old is she?" 3 months, the woman replied. "I've been trying to keep her warm." "I really have." Ethan could hear the apology woven into her words, the quiet desperation of someone who had been blamed too many times. "What's your name?" he asked. "Maria." Lily looked up at Ethan, eyes shining with urgency. "Daddy, we have blankets in the car and my cocoa. The warm kind." Ethan didn't hesitate. "You're right," he said. He shrugged off his scarf and carefully wrapped it around Ava, moving slowly, respectfully. The baby whimpered weakly, then settled slightly as the warmth reached her skin. Maria's hands trembled as she adjusted the scarf. "Thank you," she whispered. Ethan stood. "I'll be right back." He returned moments later with thick blankets from the trunk. Lily followed, clutching her cup of hot chocolate with both hands. She held it out to Maria like it was the most precious thing she owned. "This is warm," Lily said earnestly. "You can have it." Maria stared at the cup, then at Lily, her composure finally breaking. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she accepted it with shaking hands. "Thank you," she said again. "Thank you so much." Ethan pulled out his phone. "What are you doing?" Maria asked, fear flickering across her face. "Helping," he replied simply. He made the first call to his assistant. "I'm canceling my morning meetings," he said. "Everything." "Handle it." There was a pause on the other end. "Ethan, the investors can wait," he said firmly. "This can't." He ended the call and made another. Lily pressed closer to Maria, watching Ava with concern. "She be okay," Lily whispered, though it sounded more like hope than certainty. Ethan felt something twist painfully in his chest. This wasn't a problem he could solve with money alone, not quickly, not neatly, but he had resources. And he had a responsibility he could no longer ignore. Snow continued to fall around them, indifferent to the quiet miracle unfolding in that narrow alcove. And while the city rushed past, unaware, a single decision was already reshaping the course of 3 lives, simply because a little girl had refused to keep walking. The city did not pause for moments like this. Cars hissed past on slushy streets. People hurried by with collars turned up, eyes fixed forward, protecting themselves from the cold and from anything that might slow them down. Snow continued to fall, quiet and relentless, as if nothing extraordinary was happening at all. But for Ethan Cole, time had narrowed to the fragile rise and fall of a baby's chest. Ava's cries had weakened to soft whimpers, her tiny body trembling beneath layers that were never meant for winter mornings like this. Maria rocked her gently, murmuring soothing words in Spanish, her voice thin with exhaustion. Ethan returned from the car carrying a second blanket and a small emergency thermal wrap he kept in the trunk, something he added years ago during a brief phase of overpreparedness after Hannah's death. He hadn't thought about it in a long time. Now he was silently grateful. "Let me help," he said. Maria hesitated, then nodded. Ethan carefully layered the thermal wrap beneath the blanket, mindful of Ava's tiny limbs. The baby let out a weak cry, then settled again, her breathing still shallow but more rhythmic now. Lily watched intently, her face unusually serious. "She's still cold," Lily said quietly. "I know," Ethan replied. "We're going to get her somewhere warm. Very soon." Maria looked up sharply. I don't want trouble, she said, fear creeping back into her voice. I didn't do anything wrong. You're not in trouble, Ethan said firmly. I promise. He met her eyes, making sure she believed him, or at least wanted to. I have a place nearby, he continued. Warm, safe, just for today, and a doctor can meet us there. Maria's breath caught. A doctor? Yes. She shook her head instinctively. I don't have insurance. I can't. I'll take care of it, Ethan said without hesitation. The words came easily, but they weren't empty. He had spent years negotiating billion-dollar contracts. This was not something he needed permission to do. Maria's shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of her. Okay, she whispered. Ethan helped her to her feet, steadying her as she swayed slightly. Lily hovered close, reaching out to touch the blanket around Ava as if checking that it was still there. Daddy, Lily asked softly, can I sit next to the baby in the car? Ethan nodded. Of course. They drove slowly, the heater blasting warm air into the SUV. Lily sat rigid in her seat, eyes never leaving Ava, who was nestled against Maria's chest in the back seat. She's pinker now, Lily observed after a few minutes. Ethan glanced in the rearview mirror. She was right. Ava's color had improved slightly, though the baby still looked far too small for the world she'd been born into. Maria clutched the blanket tighter. Thank you, she murmured, more to the moment than to Ethan himself. They arrived at the hotel within 10 minutes, a quiet, upscale building tucked away from the main streets. The doorman's eyebrows rose briefly at the sight of the bundled woman and baby, but he said nothing. Ethan gave a subtle nod, the kind that came from years of being recognized without explanation. Inside, warmth enveloped them instantly. Maria exhaled sharply, as if she'd been holding her breath for days. Ethan led them to a private room on the ground floor. Within minutes, a staff member arrived with hot tea, towels, and a portable heater. Maria sat on the edge of the bed, carefully unwrapping Ava. Lily climbed onto the bed beside her without asking, her small hand hovering protectively near the baby. She's still shaking a little, Lily said. I know, Maria replied, tears spilling freely now. I tried. I really did. You did? Ethan said quietly. You kept her alive. That matters. A knock came at the door shortly after. The doctor was older, calm, and efficient. He examined Ava gently, listening to her breathing, checking her temperature. Mild hypothermia, he said finally, but you caught it early. She's going to be okay, Maria sobbed openly then, pressing her face into her hands. Lily scooted closer and wrapped her arms around Maria's arm again, instinctively offering comfort. It's okay, Lily whispered. You're safe now. Ethan turned toward the window, blinking hard. He hadn't expected Lily's words to cut so deeply, but they did. They echoed things he had once said to her in the dark after nightmares, after she'd cried for a mother who would never come back. The doctor gave instructions, warmth, rest, observation, and promised to check in again later. When he left, the room felt strangely quiet. Maria wiped her face. I didn't think anyone would stop, she said softly. Most days no one does. Ethan leaned against the chair. What happened? He asked. If you're willing to tell me, Maria hesitated, then nodded. I had a job, she began. A small apartment. I was doing okay. Then the daycare closed and I couldn't work my shifts. Rent fell behind. Ava's father left when I was 6 months pregnant. I kept thinking I could catch up. She laughed bitterly. I never did. Ethan listened without interrupting. He had learned long ago that solutions came later, listening came first. I stayed with a friend for a while, Maria continued. Then the shelter, but there are rules, lines, waiting lists. Some nights, there's just nowhere to go. She looked down at Ava. I tried to keep her warm. I walked all night. I didn't sleep, Lily frowned. You should sleep, she said seriously. Babies need moms who sleep. Maria smiled weakly through tears. You're right. Ethan glanced at Lily, struck again by her clarity. She didn't see complexity, she saw need. I can't promise to fix everything today, Ethan said carefully. But I can promise you won't be alone figuring it out. Maria looked up, hope and fear warring in her eyes. Why? She asked. Why help me? Ethan thought of a dozen answers: money, morality, chance, but the truth was simpler. Because my daughter asked me to stop, he said. Lily looked up, surprised. I did? Yes, he said gently. And she was right. They stayed at the hotel longer than Ethan had planned. He ordered breakfast: warm oatmeal, toast, fruit. Maria ate slowly, like someone who wasn't used to eating without rushing. Lily fed Ava with careful seriousness, holding the bottle exactly as Maria showed her. She's strong, Lily announced proudly. Maria nodded. She is. By midday, Ethan had made several calls. He spoke to a nonprofit director he knew vaguely through a charity gala he rarely thought about. He called a legal contact about emergency housing placement. He arranged childcare assistance. He didn't mention any of this to Maria yet. Some things were better revealed once they were certain. By afternoon, Ava was sleeping peacefully. Maria rested against the pillows, eyes closed for the first time in days. Ethan sat beside Lily in the armchair. "Daddy," she whispered, "are we still going to school today?" He smiled faintly. "Not today," she nodded, satisfied. "Okay." After a pause, she added, "I'm glad we stopped." "So am I," he said. The sun dipped low, casting pale gold light through the window. Outside, the snow slowed, then stopped entirely. Inside the room, warmth lingered, not just from the heater, but from something deeper, something fragile and newly formed. Ethan knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. Because once you truly see someone once, you refuse to look away, you can never return to the person who walked past. And Ethan Cole, CEO, widower, single father, understood with sudden clarity that the most important decision of his life had not been made in a boardroom. It had been made on a snowy sidewalk at the insistence of a little girl who believed no baby should ever be cold. Recovery did not happen all at once. It arrived quietly, in fragile pieces, measured in warm nights, full meals, and uninterrupted sleep. It came in moments so small they almost felt insignificant, yet together they formed the beginning of something Maria had not allowed herself to imagine in a long time. Stability. The hotel room became a temporary sanctuary. For the first 2 days, Maria barely left the bed. Her body, finally allowed to rest, seemed to collapse inward, reclaiming strength it had been forced to abandon. Ava slept for hours at a time, her breathing steady now, her color healthy and warm. Ethan checked in each morning and evening, never unannounced, never overwhelming. He sat in the armchair with his laptop closed, his phone turned face down, listening more than speaking. He was learning. Lily, on the other hand, filled the silence effortlessly. She arrived each afternoon after school with questions, drawings, and an unshakable sense of belonging. "Ava smiles in her sleep," Lily announced one day, peering into the bassinet. "That means she's dreaming," Maria said softly. "What do babies dream about?" Lily asked. Maria hesitated, then smiled. "Maybe warm places," Lily nodded seriously. "I hope so." Ethan watched the two of them together with something like awe. Lily did not see Maria as fragile or broken. She saw her as a mother, Ava as a baby, nothing more, nothing less. And that simplicity untainted by judgment was changing something in him. On the third day, Ethan arrived with a folder. "I don't want to overwhelm you," he said, setting it on the table without opening it. "So we can go through this slowly." "Or not today at all," Maria studied him carefully. She had learned to be cautious with help. Help often came with expectations, deadlines, invisible strings. "What is it?" she asked. "Options," Ethan replied. "Not obligations." He slid the folder closer. Inside were brochures and documents, transitional housing programs, childcare subsidies, a resume workshop schedule, a letter offering temporary legal assistance for housing advocacy. Maria stared at the papers, her hands trembling slightly. "I don't understand," she said. "Why would someone do all this for me?" Ethan exhaled. "Because the system is complicated. And you shouldn't have to navigate it alone while holding a baby." She looked up at him. "You don't even know me." He smiled faintly. "I know enough." What he didn't say was that he recognized the exhaustion in her eyes, the same hollowed-out look he'd seen in the mirror after Hannah died. The look of someone surviving moment by moment without room to hope. They began with housing. A transitional apartment opened up sooner than expected, small, modest, but warm and private. Maria cried when she saw it, standing in the doorway with Ava pressed to her chest. "It has a door," she whispered, A real one. Lily ran from room to room. Ava, you have a window. Ethan arranged for groceries, basic furniture, a crib, not extravagance, just enough. The first night in the apartment, Maria didn't sleep much. Not because she was cold or afraid, but because it felt unreal. She kept waking to check Ava, to make sure the silence meant safety and not danger. In the quiet hours, she thought about the man who had stopped, the little girl who had insisted. How close she had come to losing everything. Weeks passed. Maria began attending job training sessions. At first, she sat quietly in the back, afraid to speak. Her confidence had eroded over months of rejection and survival mode thinking. But slowly it returned. She remembered that she was capable, that she had once been reliable, skilled, proud of her work. Ethan helped where asked and stepped back where not. He learned restraint, something that did not come naturally to a man used to solving problems decisively. One afternoon, after Lily had finished playing with Ava, Maria turned to Ethan. I want to do this on my own, she said carefully. I mean, with help. Yes. But not because I owe anyone. Ethan nodded. That's exactly how it should be. He meant it. The bond between the children grew quickly. Lily insisted on being updated on Ava's milestones. She laughed today, Maria reported once. Lily gasped. Like a real laugh? Yes, we have to celebrate, Lily said decisively. Celebrate they did with cupcakes and paper crowns. Ava slept through most of it. For Ethan, these visits became grounding. Board meetings felt louder, less important. Success felt different now, not measured in growth charts or market share, but in small victories. Maria's first paycheck. Ava's first laugh, Lily's quiet pride. But growth rarely comes without tension, the photo resurfaced. It had been taken that first morning, Lily holding out her cup of hot chocolate, Maria clutching Ava beneath layers of borrowed warmth. Someone had posted it online with a caption that read, "A child sees what adults ignore." The internet did the rest. By the time Ethan heard about it, the image had already spread, shared, commented on, praised. His name surfaced quickly. Requests followed, interviews, panels, a story of compassion. Ethan declined them all. This wasn't a brand narrative. It was someone's life. Maria saw it anyway. She called Ethan late one evening, her voice unsteady. I didn't know people were watching, she said. I didn't agree to be a symbol. You don't have to be, Ethan replied immediately. I'll make it stop. Can you? She asked. He paused. Not entirely. But I can protect you, and he did. He shielded her name. Redirected attention toward shelters and systemic issues rather than individuals. Quietly launched a housing initiative through his company, one that focused on families, not headlines. Still, the attention changed things. Maria felt the pressure, an unspoken expectation to be grateful, to succeed perfectly, to justify the kindness she'd received. One afternoon, overwhelmed, she snapped at Lily for spilling juice. The guilt hit immediately. I'm sorry, she said, crouching. I didn't mean to yell. Lily hugged her. It's okay. My daddy yells at his computer sometimes. Maria laughed through tears. That night, she sat alone after Ava slept and allowed herself to cry, not from fear this time, but from release. Ethan faced his own reckoning. At work, his priorities were questioned. You're distracted, a board member remarked. This housing thing, how does it align with our vision? Ethan leaned back in his chair, calm. It aligns with reality, he said. And if our vision doesn't include humanity, then we need a better one. He surprised even himself. The man who once hid behind structure now found himself choosing flexibility, choosing people, choosing to stay. One evening, as snow threatened again outside, Ethan stood in Maria's small kitchen watching Lily rock Ava gently. Daddy? Lily said suddenly, Yes? Do you think Ava will remember being cold? Ethan thought carefully. No, he said. But she feel the warmth that came after. Lily nodded. Good. Maria watched them, heart full and aching all at once. She wasn't invisible anymore. But more importantly, she was no longer alone. And somewhere between survival and living, she was beginning to believe in a future that did not terrify her. A future that had room for warmth, for safety, for hope. The first snow of the new winter fell at night, the way it always did, quietly, without asking permission. By morning, the city had transformed. Streetlights reflected off untouched sidewalks, and the air carried that familiar hush, as if the world itself was holding its breath. For most people, it was an inconvenience. For some, it was beautiful. For Maria, it was a reminder. She stood by the window of her small apartment, Ava balanced securely on her hip, and watched the snow drift down in slow, graceful spirals. The glass was warm beneath her fingertips. The room behind her was warm, too heated, lived in, safe. A year ago, warmth had been something she begged the night for and never received. Now it surrounded her. Ava babbled softly, tugging at Maria's sweater with chubby fingers. She had grown so much, strong legs, bright eyes, lungs powerful enough to fill the apartment with laughter. There was no trace left of the fragile, shaking infant who had once been wrapped in borrowed scarves and desperation. Maria kissed the top of her daughter's head. "You're okay," she whispered. "You're safe." The words still mattered. She said them often, not because Ava needed reassurance anymore, but because Maria did. The apartment was modest, one bedroom, a small kitchen, furniture that didn't quite match. But every object inside had been chosen with intention, not urgency. Nothing here was temporary in the way her life once had been. On the wall hung a calendar marked neatly in blue inkwork shifts, daycare times, bill due dates, every box filled, every payment made, every obligation met. It wasn't perfection, it was stability. A knock at the door broke the quiet. Before Maria could move, Ava squealed, twisting excitedly in her arms. "Lily!" she chirped. Maria smiled and opened the door. Lily burst inside like a gust of winter air, cheeks pink, eyes bright, her backpack nearly as big as she was. "Ava!" Lily shouted happily. "It snowed again!" Ethan followed more slowly, carrying grocery bags, his coat dusted white. He smiled at the sight of Ava reaching eagerly for Lily, the two girls greeting each other like old friends. "Careful," Maria laughed. "She's convinced you're here just for her," Lily beamed. "I am." She set her backpack down and pulled out a small stuffed bear, soft and worn from love. "I brought you something," she told Ava solemnly. "It's for winter." "Bears are good at staying warm." Ava grabbed it immediately, gnawing on one ear. "Approved," Ethan said dryly. They moved easily through the space now, like people who belong there. Ethan set the groceries on the counter, instinctively helping unload. Lily narrated every movement Ava made, as if the baby were starring in a documentary. Maria watched them, her chest tight with something that felt dangerously close to peace. She hadn't expected this part. When Ethan first helped her, when he'd made the calls, arranged the housing, insisted on support without conditions, she had been grateful, yes, but also afraid. Help, in her experience, was fleeting, temporary, conditional. This had been different. Ethan hadn't rushed her. He hadn't demanded gratitude or transformation. He had simply stayed present, even when things slowed, even when progress wasn't linear. That mattered more than she could put into words. Dinner simmered on the stove while snow thickened outside. Lily insisted on setting the table. Ava sat in her high chair, banging the stuffed bear enthusiastically against the tray. "Daddy," Lily said suddenly, "remember last year when it was really, really cold?" Ethan paused. "I remember. That was the day we met, Ava," Lily said thoughtfully. Maria's hands stilled. "Yes," Ethan said quietly. "It was." Lily frowned slightly, her expression serious. "I don't like that day. But I'm glad it happened." Ethan met Maria's eyes across the room. "So am I," he said. After dinner, Ava fell asleep quickly, worn out from excitement. Maria laid her gently in the crib and lingered there longer than necessary, watching her chest rise and fall. She remembered a different night, one where she had stayed awake not out of love, but fear, where silence had been terrifying instead of peaceful. She closed the door softly behind her. In the living room, Lily colored on the floor while Ethan sat on the couch, scrolling through emails he hadn't answered all day. Maria hesitated, then sat beside him. "Can I ask you something?" She said, "Of course." "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Stopping that day?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked toward Lily, who was humming to herself, completely absorbed in her drawing. "No," he said finally. "I regret all the times before it." "When I didn't stop?" Maria nodded slowly. I was afraid, she admitted. When things started getting better, I thought if I messed up, if I failed, it would mean you were wrong to help me. Ethan turned toward her fully. You don't owe me success, he said gently. You don't owe me anything. I know that now, she said. But at first, being seen felt heavy, like I had to prove I deserved it. Ethan exhaled. That's not kindness, he said. That's pressure, she smiled faintly. You've learned a lot this year. So have you. Outside, the snow continued to fall. The housing initiative Ethan had started quietly, almost reluctantly, had grown faster than he ever expected. What began as a small internal program at his company had expanded into partnerships with nonprofits across the city, not because he pushed it. Because others saw it and said, yes, this matters. He never used Maria's name. Never used Lily's image. He insisted on that. This wasn't about a savior narrative. It was about building systems that didn't require miracles. Still, sometimes the world tried to simplify it. Journalists emailed, invitations arrived. People wanted the story in neat lines: hero, victim, transformation. Ethan refused most of them. Some things lost their truth when polished too brightly. Later that night, after goodbyes were said and coats pulled on, Ethan and Lily stepped back into the snow-covered street. The cold was sharp but manageable. Lily slipped her hand into his pocket, the way she always did when the air bit too hard. Daddy? She asked. Yes? Do you think Ava remembers being cold? Ethan considered the question carefully. No, he said. I don't think so, Lily nodded. Good. After a few steps, she added, but I think she remembered being warm. Ethan stopped walking. The words settled deep, rearranging something inside him. Yes, he said softly. I think you're right. They continued down the sidewalk, leaving small footprints behind them, temporary but real. Years would pass. Ava would grow up knowing stability, not wealth, not ease, but safety. She would know what it felt like to sleep without fear, to trust that tomorrow would come. Maria would keep building her life, not perfectly, not without setbacks, but with resilience she hadn't known she possessed. Ethan would continue learning that leadership was not about distance or control, but about proximity, about choosing to stay human in a world that rewarded detachment. And Lily, sweet, observant Lily, would grow into someone who noticed what others missed. Someone who stopped. Someone who remembered that sometimes the most important thing you can do is listen to the quietest cry. The city would forget the photo eventually, headlines always faded. But the warmth that remained, the kind that changed direction, that interrupted despair, that rewrote futures, would last far longer than winter ever could. Because one snowy morning, a little girl had said the simplest, truest thing in the world, Daddy, her baby is freezing, and someone had listened. Not everyone does. But when they do, the cold doesn't win.